That's a great backdrop, by the way, Lisa.
It's a real one.
Very festive.
Trying to be in the festive mood.
All right, we're ready. Oh, there's Kevin. So, I mean, usually it's announced we're live streaming now. Is Charles Raveley? Okay. This is the Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting, December 6th, 2021 for Sweetwater Union High School District. We'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Segur, oh, do we do that? We don't normally do that, I don't think.
No, Chair Hall, we do not.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll just do a quick hello to everybody, and we'll have Dr. Sockfield, if you would, introduce your team and the other guests on the call, so we can start. We've got Nicholas Segura, our president of the board, who is also a committee member, and Lisa Schmidt, who is our community member on the committee, Dr. Moises Aguirre, our district superintendent, and now I'm going to hand it off to you, Dr. Sockfield, to introduce the rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Chair Hall, and to the rest of the committee. Good afternoon. And so I'd like to welcome and introduce our management team who have worked very closely on some of the items here that we'll be discussing with our audit. So we have Athena Quarles, who's our debt finance manager. We have Carolina Zimmerman, of course, who's helping us facilitate the meeting. We have Don Prince, who's our purchasing manager. We have Liz Reyes, the accounting manager. And we have Nancy Piccone, who's a director of fiscal services. And we have Vanessa Garcia, who's our payroll manager. So that is our fiscal services team. We also do have Ms. Janaea Quirk here as well. She will help with, she's been helping her and her team, assisted with the Proposition O bond financials. And I'm looking to see, and then I know we have our internal audit staff as well, Daphne Enriquez and Gerardo. I don't see Gerardo on here. I'm not sure if he's going to be joining later. And that's from a district standpoint. And then from the CROW team, we have their engagement partner, Kevin Smith. And then we have our audit managers, Elizabeth Sav and Charles Ribley. They're joining us to present the audit reports.
Thank you very much for those introductions. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Paula Hall. I'm a board member and the chair of the audit subcommittee. All right, so we'll get started. Are there any public comments for this evening?
No, we did not receive any public comments.
All right, great. So we'll move on to item C for discussion, the audit updates. Dr. Sockfield.
Thank you. So I'd like to start off first before we hand over to the CROW team to go through the details. A couple points to note. Our audit, this is the first time in 3 years since many of us here on the management team have been with Sweetwater, where we are bringing forward an audit that is timely. We do have an exception this particular year. The code does allow for, again, as the COVID environment and so forth with the pandemic, it did get extended to January 31st of next month. But we actually worked very closely with our CROW team and with the management team here to ensure that we got back on track before a December 15th timeline. So we're bringing it forward today to this committee and then to the Board of Trustees on the 13th. So we're very pleased that we're back onto what we consider a traditional schedule with our audits. The other point that I'd like to mention, and I know Kevin will be going over this here shortly, is the last few years we've done a tremendous amount of work to, again, part of our fiscal recovery plan. But you'll see, and what will be highlighted is we only have 2 findings on our district-wide financial. Again, a significant improvement compared to prior years. And what will be shared is that those 2 findings are directly correlated to the implementation of the new computer system. Again, that's part of our corrective action plan that we identified several years ago and with various parties that we've been sharing. So again, our goal is to eventually not have those audit findings, but again, we've made a lot of improvements in those areas. And so I wanted to certainly highlight that on behalf here of the team that have worked very diligently to help put those systems in place to make that happen. So at this point, I'd like to then hand over to Kevin Smith to review the district-wide financials for 2021.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Hall. And Dr. Sockeld always does a tremendous job of taking many of the things that I want to share with you guys and putting it up into the introduction. But first and foremost, the sheer fact that we're here in December is a testament to her and her team and the hard work that she and her team has done throughout the entirety of the audit engagement. Based upon, again, those two deficiencies that were known, and we'll talk about those in a little bit, but limitations with the existing computer system, et cetera, we continue to have lower scope sizes, lower materiality than what you might anticipate for a school district the size of Sweetwater. With that comes an increased amount of audit scrutiny. An audit is always a very iterative process with lots of questions, answers, provided by client information, detailed testing, and continuing to move forward. The entire management team responded to us in a very timely fashion, and that's why we're here in December, and we look forward to meeting with the entire Board of Trustees next week. We will be prepared to issue an unmodified opinion upon the financial statements, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide. It really means two things. One, that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and the books and records of the district support those financial statements. One of the key points, though, that I think is important for the audit committee to understand is in arriving at an unmodified opinion, there is the opportunity for adjustments to be recorded within the financial statements. And in past years or over the past 2 years, there have been significant adjustments, some impacting previous periods, as well as current period adjustments. In the current year, those did not occur. So really what I'm trying to stress is that the financial statements and the information that was provided to us is held up to audit scrutiny. There were no adjustments, and particularly in the area of capital assets, which is something that was a focal point of management, and Athena and her team did a tremendous job in that area. So we are prepared to issue an unmodified opinion upon the financial statements. We also conduct an audit in accordance with the OMB as far as the single audit or the federal grants. We will be issuing an unmodified opinion there as well. For a district the size of Sweetwater, this is somewhat unusual to have a district without findings. It really means that the controls, as well as kind of the attitude towards compliance, is really top notch there. And I appreciate everything from that standpoint. Consistently, that would be the same answer from the state compliance that we also opine upon. A variety of areas that were required as your external auditors to test as it relates to state compliance, and in each one of those passed without exception. We also audit a financial statement audit of the performance or the bond audit, the financial statements. Again, we will be issuing an unmodified opinion. And we also issue a performance audit. And again, reminding you guys that you've asked us or engaged us to provide additional assurance or an expanded performance audit above and beyond just those requirements that are spelled out in state legislation. And in those areas as well, we did not have findings. So without doubt, the best audit out of the last three. We continue to have two deficiencies as it relates to the preparation or the internal controls over financial reporting. And as Dr. Sockeld said, they really relate to limitations that are just embedded within the existing IT system. Management over the course of the last 3 years have instituted a variety of what we would call compensating controls, often manual kind of workarounds, if you will, from the system to really address those system limitations. But again, anytime a system is, for lack of better words, as porous as this one is, when you're relying upon manual controls, we still feel it necessary to identify that as a deficiency. Again, as Dr. Sockeld said, the implementation of the new system, we believe, will address those issues. But again, that implementation and an effective go live is absolutely critical. I'm going to pause for a second. I've talked for too long. I'm going to take a sip of water. And Charles or Elizabeth, if I have failed to mention anything, please do.
One thing I just wanted to highlight on the state compliance part, and maybe if Carolina, am I able to share my screen?
Yes, Elizabeth, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. I'm going to do that. I'll just share the draft here. This is what you guys have in your packet. And let's just scroll down here. I should have bookmarked this page, but I like to highlight here. So this is the state compliance opinion that Kevin was referring to. And this is the laundry list of items that we had to look into. So everything that had a yes means that it was applicable to Sweetwater and we had to perform procedures. And in order to receive an unmodified opinion, you really need to have 0 errors. So the state of California does not allow for materiality when it comes to the state audit. And so the fact that you have an unmodified opinion means we found no errors. So even if, so for example, for attendance, if we found that one of the engagement logs was not present for one of the students that we selected in the current year, keeping in mind that that was a whole new way of taking attendance, we would still have to report that back to you in this audit report, even if it didn't have a significant fiscal impact. And that would automatically qualify your opinion. So the fact, I just like to make sure that boards understand that an unmodified opinion on state compliance is not functioning off of materiality. That means that we did not find any errors in all of the procedures that we had to perform over those areas. So just something to emphasize there as Kevin was taking a minute to take a break.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Great point. It also gave me a chance to regroup and rethink. One other thing that I would think is appropriate to share with you guys. There continues to be disclosure both within our opinion as well as the footnotes to the financial statements regarding the overall kind of financial stability of the district. It is reflecting dramatic improvements. The financial statements will show you that for the first time in the 3 years that we've been associated with you guys, that the contingency reserve has been met. A lot of that deals with one-time revenues, et cetera, that has and kind of proper oversight of the board and how that has been budgeted and spent. So the district has made significant improvement as it relates to the overall financial stability of the district. However, we continue to see possibilities of declining enrollment. We're not for sure what will happen with continued state aid as far as the one-time revenues as it relates to COVID, et cetera. So we continue to highlight kind of that, for lack of better words, the volatility that the entire LEA or all California public schools are in right now, as well as kind of those limited reserves that Sweetwater has. So I say all of that to say tremendous positive grounds were made in the current year, but we still continue to be somewhat conservative and just want the readers to be focused on the fact that although we believe a corner has been turned, we're not far down the journey in that turning of the corner.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. I really appreciate that. Is there more you're going to go through on this report?
I would be happy to answer any questions at this time.
All right. Okay, great. I'll go to my fellow committee members and see if they have any questions they would like to ask at this time. President Segura?
I don't have a question right now, but I really like what I'm hearing and all the work that has been done by Jenny and the team under Dr. Aguirre's leadership. And I totally hear what Kevin, you're saying about, we've turned a corner, but we're still fragile, I guess is a word that we should keep in mind and mindful of our spending with sound financial practices. I think that's definitely helped, and the board totally understands because we're reminded almost every meeting by Dr. Salcal and Dr. Aguirre that we have this is one-time funding, but we still are very mindful of that and really need to remain focused on keeping our path correct and just and being careful in our spending practices as we go forward.
Thank you. Ms. Schmidt, would you like to ask a question?
No questions. I just want to thank all of you. As someone new to this, I read over the weekend and just impressed with the thoroughness of all the reports, kind of going back into the history that helped me put everything in perspective. And I also follow the state forecast, so I'm hopeful that revenues, the trend keeps going in the right direction and able to provide assistance for the district moving forward. But I just want to think I'm thoroughly impressed with just all the information provided. So thank you for your leadership, Dr. Geating and the staff. Thank you.
Thank you both for your comments. It's very clear that the district has really shifted their operational standards in the last 3 years under Dr. Salcal, and especially in the last year and a half under Dr. Aguirre's guidance as well. And I know that the board is very appreciative of the leadership's work in this and all the staff in the finance division. It's been tremendous. We're very watchful over the conversion into N4. We keep asking for updates to make sure that we're moving that timeline along, that we're meeting the, because again, at the end of this year, we don't expect that opinion to change because N4 still will not be implemented at that point in time. So we understand a lot of work, like you stated, there's been 3 audits in 24 months, 3 major audits. 3 major audits, and the prior 2 audits had significant, as you stated, Kevin, significant adjustments because of what was found in those in the financial statements. I know that a lot of the manual work that goes into what they're doing, and I'm wondering, this is probably not a question you can address efficient or really address, but what is a fully automated integrated system going to replace? There's still, if you have garbage in, garbage out, right? So how do you monitor and ensure that system has the appropriate information as well? And I think the manual, especially at the beginning in the first year or 2, those manual systems kind of have to be kept up in order to ensure that the system is working correctly. Is that what you experience when you have districts convert to new systems? Is there a check and balance that you do in that way?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. And I'll also defer to Dr. Salcal with this, but anytime you have a system implementation, there should be robust procedures from a data conversion standpoint. And everything that we have seen at this point, it's not financially significant. We have not looked at those conversion plans, although we are here to answer questions, and we do get questions from staff about the conversion. But we would expect a robust data conversion process. I think that the last 3 years of audits, as painful as it has been, has put them in a tremendous place for that data conversion. When I think about last year's, and I'm going to mix last year and the previous year up just probably a little bit, but basically your team recreated the capital asset detail. That would have been garbage in if that had been converted from previous records. So there has been a tremendous amount of work already in place to create proper records for those subledgers that will be brought up into the ERP system. So I think that the district is in a good place from a data conversion, but there will definitely be key elements and controls that's embedded within their implementation plan that we will look at during the year of conversion.
Thank you. Thank you for that, because I agree that there's been a lot of work, and some of those, I mean, where we are now really has set us up to do a clean conversion, I believe. We have to make sure, I mean, when we started out in this process of 3 years ago or 2 years ago, there wasn't even a sense that we had control over the positions, and Dr. Sakil, Dr. Aguirre, and the HR staff and Ms. Picone, they've all come to provide that information and really give us assurance and confidence that we have a good system in place, so that even the HR system conversion will also be a clean and robust changeover. So I'm really looking forward to that. I just know that when you come back to audit this year, it's still going to show those findings because we won't yet have converted. And we know that to be happening. The work is going on right now to make sure we can do that conversion. And I look forward to seeing the following year, after that, to be a really more clean audit with less findings, and that, knock on wood, if everything goes well. And as a board, board members, they all know the challenges here. We've been listening to it and learning about it for several years now, and we've been advocating on behalf of public education for many years, even before becoming board members, because there's always challenges, especially in California, with the stability of funding. And so even without declining enrollment, there's always been challenges. So we appreciate that you emphasize that, because it is the true reality for every school district in California, not just ones like ours that have been, pulling themselves out of a deficit for quite, a long time. So I'm just really pleased with the audit. I do have a couple of small questions. Did you want to comment, Kevin? No.
Chairman Hall, I see that Dr. Getty's.
Right. I saw that. I was just,
Okay.
I didn't know if he wanted to ask. I was going to ask a question first and then let him comment, but he can go ahead.
It's your show. Sorry, just want to make sure.
Go ahead. No, I saw it. He's right in the middle of my screen, and I see his hand. Go ahead, Dr. Aguirre.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. I was waiting until there was a pause, so either way. And mine is half question, half statement. And before I kind of lose my train of thought. So my half statement is, it's my belief, and really it's more of an analogy, that I think at this point, and this is where I'll ask Kevin for clarification if my understanding is incorrect. Really, this is the first year that I have a sense that we are now in a place where we've addressed a great deal of the issues that were present here before. There's still some issues like the implementation of the system, but the questions or the challenges that I hear from Kevin moving forward are now the same challenges that pretty much every other district in the state of California is facing, from the perspective of declining enrollment, unknown budgetary impacts from the state budget. So in a way, the challenges before us mirror the challenges that are before pretty much every district in the state. So in a way, that's the good news, bad news kind of situation. Good news is it appears we've addressed our internal district specific issues, pending the implementation of the system. Still outstanding now are some of the same issues that are outstanding for pretty much every district in the state, is how I understand it. But I wanted to check that understanding with Kevin and see kind of if that would be a fair kind of characterization of our where we currently stand.
I think it is, but I would caution just a little bit of the optimism, although I think there is a need for some of the optimism, and the district should be very pleased with the progress that they've made over 3 years. Moises, it's, yes, you're facing the same issues, but we can all face the same challenges, but it depends upon what level of strength we're coming from. And I will caution, 3 things, and I loved what the board president referred to this as kind of a place of fragility. The system implementation has not gone in yet. Minimum reserves have been met, but they are just barely met the minimum reserves. And prior to the implementation of the system and even ongoing, once you have the system, you have an incredible, I believe you have an incredible management team that has put policies and procedures in place. But again, it's also about maintaining that team. So I just say, yes, you're facing the same challenges that all districts face, but you're facing it from just I think a sense of fragility that maybe not all districts have. So I don't want to just say, okay, we're like everyone else.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, and that I think is a very fair statement. And again, there's a lot of work that's still ongoing, but there has been that improvement. But the reality is there's still some areas of risk moving forward, fragility and/or risk that we need to be very cautious of, and again continue to make good, sound fiscal decisions around, and as well as making sure our staff is sufficiently equipped so that we can continue making good decisions with good information.
And if I could highlight, I think sometimes auditors sense things and there's no place to actually put it into the report, but you're exactly right. It's twofold. It's smart fiscal decisions. And as an auditor, I don't opine upon smart fiscal decisions. That's the board, that's the CFO, it's the superintendent's office. I report on the transactions, how those decisions translated into the financial statements in accordance with GAAP. But in order to make good decisions, you need to have good information. And if I could stress 2 things out of this presentation is the timeliness of the audit. So we can all feel good that we're here in December, but really what that means is there was not and all of management will probably kick me for saying this because a year-end close is never easy, but it was not a significant process of trying to create a year's worth of data. The financial statements and the transactions were booked at the proper time, and that allows you guys to make informed decisions. Whether they're good or not, that's up to you guys to figure out, but it allows you to make good decisions. So 2 things, the timeliness and the lack of adjustments means really that the data was presented to you at the time of the decision making was the most up-to-date as well as accurate. The year-end audit is really only as good as of that fiscal year end. It's really about, can you produce it timely, and what's the level of effort and adjustment required to get to the accurate financials. And that's why this is good news from being here in December and lack of adjustments.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kevin. I totally agree. And we've seen it. That's what I was saying before. The change that the board has seen in just how information is presented in a clear manner to us we are very confident in the staff as it stands now. They are equipped to do the right work and do the good work and to inform the board in a timely manner. And from that, we we base our decisions. That has taken a lot of work to get us to that place, and we're very appreciative. We're very appreciative of it, because it's been a big change. That's all. I'm not going to go into it more, but I just want every staff member on here to take that back to their staff and really to deliver that message across the financial system. The people in that work have done wonderful, and we appreciate it, and we want it to keep going. This, having people know what their job is and that they're going to be held to those deadlines and accountable for those things is really key in the operational side of any district. And I know that we've got a good one going now, so thank you. And I look forward to the conversion. We really appreciate that. If you wouldn't mind, Kevin, on page 88, which is a summary of the auditor's results, and it's like a table about the financial statements and the awards and things, and it goes down and talks about the yeses and nos. Could we could you explain that or go over that section for us? Page 88.
We can, and I believe Elizabeth is
Yeah,
bringing
it's
it
got
up.
it right here. I was unmuting just in case your connection wasn't working.
So, great question, and this is something required by the federal government. It's really kind of okay, we get that auditors have reports and opinions, and it's really hard to digest what it all really means. So this is a boilerplate, although then completed, template to really give a reader an understanding of the auditor's results. And it's broken out into two sections. Later, we can go back to where Elizabeth took us to the state compliance, but this is focused upon the financial statements and the federal awards. So the very first question is type of auditor's report issued. And this is what I referred to earlier, is we're issuing an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide. It then asks internal control over financial reporting or any material weaknesses identified. So a material weakness is a deficiency within internal control that in the ordinary course of business, there is more than a reasonable chance that a material misstatement could exist within the financial statements. We have issued material weaknesses for Sweetwater in the past, but as you see here, we have deemed that to be no. A significant deficiency, on the other hand, is kind of for lack of better words, it's a middle of the fence. It's not a deficiency that we shouldn't be worried about. It's clearly not a material weakness, but it's something that those charged with governance or this audit committee should be made aware of. And again, this is why we're saying these issues that relate to the current IT system, although management has done a tremendous job of providing a variety of workarounds and compensating controls, you should still be aware of the risk that's embedded within the IT system. So those would be the significant deficiencies identified. Then very clearly, from a government auditing standards, we're also required to test whether or not there's non-compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and grants that could have a material impact upon the financial statements. And we identified no such non-compliance. It then goes into our federal awards, or your federal awards, and asks were any material weaknesses identified or significant deficiencies. And again, none were identified as it relates to grant compliance. And an unmodified opinion upon grant compliance was issued. Then we still, following the single audit guidance, have a variety of other deficiencies that could be noted. It could be a question cost of $10,000, something that may not have modified our opinion, but are still required to be disclosed. In that case, it is still, again, a no. There are specific requirements embedded within the Single Audit Act that identifies how we go about identifying major programs. And as you can see here, these two federal programs, primarily related to to COVID funding were deemed to be the major programs in the current year. So this is where we spent the vast majority of our time as it relates to grant compliance, testing these specific programs, both from an internal control as well as a compliance standpoint. The dollar threshold, again, is a formulaic calculation based upon your level of federal funding. In this case, the way we distinguish between Type A and Type B programs is about $1.7 million. You are not deemed to be low risk. That has to do with material weaknesses identified in years past. You continue with the same results that you have over the course of several years. This could go to a yes, deemed to be low risk, but really this is not it really doesn't have any indication that, you know, the district's at a higher risk for any significant non-compliance. It's based upon, again, certain factors, and it then spells out the dollar coverage that we have to have. So based upon it not being a low risk, we actually perform more auditing procedures than what a low risk auditee might be required. And again, the third and final piece, the state awards, which Elizabeth went through that report, unmodified, and again, no level of materiality there. You either did or did not comply based upon our test work. And for each of those sub-elements or objectives that we tested, you were in compliance.
Thank you very much. And I did read the memos that followed that, the sections that followed it, and it did talk about, and also that preceded it, which it goes into what, you know, the definitions of the various findings, if there are, what they are, at what level, and also about the control processes and the the reconciliation of different modules or different processes, and that is being implemented. It appears like your recommendation under section 2 about monthly reconciliations of accounts receivable and payable and cash in bank, all those things. And I know that that is what you were speaking to previously about the processes that are in place, that have been put in place by Dr. Sockeld and her team. And so I'm very glad that we've addressed in most ways to that. And I do understand. I just needed more clarification, and to make sure that we're seeing this is really that you have found no compliance issues during the audit period with the federal dollars.
That is correct.
Thank you very much. And yes, and so it'll probably still be another year before we get out of the findings being tied to an implementation of our system. Are there any other significant issues that you would like to call our attention to as you have been performing this audit or see in our financial statements?
The only thing, again, and I mean this as compliments to the management team, and I'm probably beating a dead horse at this point in time, but 3 audits in the course of 20 months, all while we're working remotely or hybrid in a, you know, while the world's going through a pandemic. So I think you have an excellent team. I think your team is most likely tired.
Yes.
Not only, again, the board president said something I thought, very well said, the fragility. I think in a lot of respects, it's kind of the word that I would caution everybody with, is the fragile nature of the good news that we're presenting today. It was hard earned. It is well earned, and it was achieved, but I would still say fragile. So continued support. I keep going back to the management team, but you know, anything that you read about internal controls will tell you that it comes from tone at the top, which is the superintendent's office, this audit committee as well as the board. They have been supported through this. As your audit partner, I would ask for you to continue to support, because again, trying times and it's not over. Implementations are hard. So
Definitely.
fragile would be my word.
Yes, thank you for that. And yes. Thank you. I have no other questions on this. I really appreciate it. And I again thank you for the good work and for the information. There's a lot there. I did talk to Dr. Sockel about the MD&A and what some of that was contained in her management and discussion and analysis. I spoke with her about that. I can't find my notes now. Perhaps for the good of everyone, if you want to share some of your MD&A information, Dr. Sawkill, to kind of clarify if there's anything in there. I know my question around it was about page 7 when you and I spoke, and then a lot of it had to go around some of the things, like my question about page 7 in the statement of net position area. There was a statement or sentence that said land is accounted for at purchase cost, not market value, and is not depreciated. And my question was, is this a choice of the district or is it in a legal requirement? So if you wanted to address that, because obviously in many of our districts that are, at least 100 or some even older than that, land purchased originally is quite a different value now than it would have been at the time it was originally purchased. So can you talk to that a little bit, Dr. Sawkill, and then, yeah.
Yes, definitely, Trustee Hall. So what we shared was that what we discussed, this is a generally accepted accounting principle that when land is recorded, it's recorded at cost. So we maintain that on our general ledger or on the books, as we say, until let's say the land is sold. Then it's at that point where you recognize fair market value and that increase when things do appreciate over time. You recognize that gain at that point, but we do maintain it at that level, and that's an accounting standard. And also too, it's not depreciated like you have building improvements or other equipment over a useful life. Land is kind of in perpetuity kind of thing. So you do not have that consideration for depreciation. And again, this is all coming back to the accounting standards that we in our profession abide by.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to make sure we had that clarified in case anybody else had questions about that section as well. All right, so I don't really have any other questions at this time for Kevin. So if you want to go ahead and take it, Dr. Sawkill.
And I'm sorry, Trustee Hall, so you were saying, so we can move on to the next item?
Yes.
Okay, so the next item is our performance audit for Proposition O, and that's in accordance with the Prop 39 requirements. There's specific criteria under that that the CRO team has to follow certain items, and they'll touch upon that here shortly, along with a separate financial audit for that program as well. So again, no findings in that particular area. Again, a lot of working very collaboratively and closely with Janaea Quirk and her team. A lot of work looking at contracts, different considerations. And so I'll defer to Kevin and to Charles for any more specific information.
Once again, Dr. Sawkill, you did a tremendous job of addressing what I was going to share. First, I would introduce you guys again, and I know she did this earlier, to Charles Rabley, who is another senior manager within our public sector practice. We think it's really important to kind of differentiate engagement teams. Although I'm the signing partner sitting on top of both, we have separate and distinct teams looking at these. As Dr. Sockeld said, we do 2 audits as it relates to the PROPO or the 39 bond fund. We first look at the financial statements. So think of it as a fund or a sub-fund within the financial statements that we just referred to. But we are auditing it at a lower level of materiality because it is a standalone fund. We do audit that in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and we will again be issuing an unmodified opinion upon that PROPO financial statement audit. We do, in accordance with state legislation, look at certain aspects of the performance audit. And this is something that we have previously shared with your bond oversight committee, but we're issuing an unmodified opinion there as well. It is a performance audit, so it's really designed to look at specific objectives as it relates to the internal controls, policies, and procedures around the spending of bond monies. There are certain requirements within the state legislation that we audit. You guys have actually engaged us to audit at for certain objectives above and beyond those required within state statute. And in each of those cases, we walk through, and you can see in the narrative of the report, you see this is the objective. These are the specific steps that we took to audit that objective, and then our conclusion as it relates to that objective. And in each of the objectives, we have reached the opinion that compliance was reached by the district, and henceforth why we are issuing an unmodified opinion upon the bond program.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the team? From the committee members? No, hearing none, I will ask you my question. If you don't mind, I just have a simple question, and that is around the contracting for PROPO and those projects. And did you find any irregularities? If you did find any irregularities, you would have brought them into the audit or expressed it in there? I mean, it seems to me the process we use and everything.
Yes, we would have, and there is a specific objectives. One of the things that I think is hard when you are first reading this report is it is focused upon current year. So there are a couple different objectives that as you read the report, we may look at expenditures, and those could relate to contracts entered in previous years, but we would only be looking at the current year expenditure. But one of the objectives actually spells out look at current year procurement. And that's where we look at the contracting phase, and our report will specify how many contracts were entered into in the current year, as well as how many we looked at. And you are, Chairman Hall, you are very correct. If we had noted any exceptions, we would be denoting those within our report. And there were no exceptions that we identified.
Thank you. All right. Is there any other questions on this, on either the financial or the performance audit? I don't see the team, the committee, so I don't see their hands raised or hear their voices, so I would assume they don't have any questions on these. They're pretty straightforward. I know that the PROPO work is, a lot of that has already been out there. You know, what we have going on is, I think, 3 projects or so under this PROPO. So it's not like we have a lot of projects going on across the district. So it's pretty manageable, I believe, for you to have that audit done and completed. And would your team like to make any statements around that? No?
No, you're exactly right. You're winding the program down. You're down to 3. Again, that's where our focal point is we spend more time on individual expenditures than contracts being entered into at this point in time. But it is very manageable at this point.
All right, thank you. All right, if you have nothing else to add on that, I'm fine. I think I just want to say, we really appreciate you and your team as well, Kevin, because all those 3 audits in 24 months were performed by your team. So I know it's been a lot of work, a lot of conversations, a lot of papers to go through. So on both sides, we want to thank you all for your work and your leadership and in that effort. So thank you.
I get to
And I
work
hope-
with a great team, but thank you.
Yeah. And I hope you all have a wonderful holiday and New Year's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sawkill,
Okay, again,
I'm passing it back to you.
just again, I want to say thank you to the Crow team because it's been a pleasure working with them, and we've done a lot together over the last 3 years to get the financials where they're at. So appreciate all that work and collaboration.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. See you next week.
Yes. Next Monday. All right. Go ahead, Dr. Sawkill. I pass it back to you.
So Trustee Hall, just one thing to note. So these 2 items will be making then a recommendation to the board next week on behalf of the committee, correct? Okay.
Right. Accepting the audit, right?
Mm-hmm. And so then the next item we have on the agenda, as Caroline is pulling that up, is just an update on our ongoing or completed audits that are not necessarily the fiscal ones. And so what we've got on the list here, and it has not changed since our last meeting. We're still awaiting the final report from CalPERS. It is going to be a report that's going to be comprehensive, not just for Sweetwater. They're going to have it for the school districts that they've audited. So we hope to have that soon. They did share that we thought we'd probably have that by the end of this month or so. So hopefully by the next committee meeting, we'll have that report. We still also have our County of San Diego Health and Human Services review. It's in terms of the invoice and the analysis that they go through for reimbursement. That's being reviewed. And then we have the AB 139 extraordinary audit. We have this on here ongoing, again, kind of tying to what we just discussed with the external auditors, is a lot of the corrective action plans are tied to the implementation of the computer system. So that's why our work is ongoing in that regard till we get that finalized. And then, of course, we've got our last few items here, which was just presented to the committee, the district financial audit, and then the PROPO financial and performance audits.
Thank you very much. Do you want us to say anything about any of these in more depth, or?
I think we covered it during our last meeting, and I think once we have the final report, which again, I hope those ones that are pending, we'll have that by the next committee meeting, then we can go into more detail on what their recommendations or any responses are, the outcomes from those.
Thank you. And we just went through with Kevin and his team 3 years audits in 24 months. That was a PROPO audit, a PROPO performance audit, and the regular financial audit, which were all deeper dives than usual, than any, and then you had all these different things going on at the same time. So it's been a tremendous lift by your team, and we are very, we really appreciate everything you've done. So go ahead with your next item.
I think that's the last item under the audit updates. I believe then it's internal audit.
Okay. I forgot to ask if Mr. Segura or Ms. Schmidt had any questions?
No, I don't. It was pretty straightforward. I'm good with what's there.
Okay. Did we lose our other committee member? I don't see her, but anyway, all right, so go on to the internal audit item.
Hey, good evening. This is Daphne Enriquez. Gerardo wasn't able to join us, so I'll be presenting and answering any questions that you may have. The first item is internal audits ongoing and completed. There are no significant changes from the last one that was presented in November. If we refer to the first section, this is for our audits that we have in progress. There are a few such as the fraud hotline, the district's unduplicated count. We have an audit ongoing for nutrition services. And there are a couple special requests that's checked off as number 14 at the bottom of the page. And there's more detail for those on the second page under table A. That shows that we have an audit that we're attempting to conduct for a school-connected organization at Olympian High School, as well as one for adult education. For the second section that also begins on page 2 under non-audit services, number 5 for spend down plans shows that most of these were presented in the last meeting. And after that time, our office issued approval memos to the principals and ASB advisors of each of those sites. And these memos shared next steps, such as how orders should be placed, how to track expenses, and expectations to spend excess amounts in the current year. Today, we are sharing 3 additional plans that are included in the last section of our agenda items. So we'll get to that in a minute, but just to give more background, during the last meeting, it was noted that the collection and review of these were still in progress. The plan from Rancho Del Rey Middle was recently submitted and signed by Dr. Salkeld. A revised plan was submitted by Bonita Vista High because the initial plan was submitted for less than the amount that was calculated as excess. So the new plan included another item for that difference. And with Montgomery High, a revised plan was submitted for that site to reduce the cost for an item. It was a poster maker. So instead of purchasing 2, they're purchasing 1, and they added expenses for school-wide dances. In the last section that begins on page 3, this lists our issued reports. Those that are highlighted in gray, if we scroll down a little bit, gray indicates that these were presented in the last meeting. And in the last month, if we scroll down a little further, there were 4 reports issued. But since reports included as part of the current meeting agenda are for completed engagements and for those that action plans have been received, the report and action plan for option secondary is included. And it is likely that the others will be presented in the next meeting. So that's it for our ongoing and completed. And if you go to the next section, this is the audit report that was issued for option secondary. The findings were similar to those that we saw with the reports that were issued in the last meeting, nothing significant. And then the very last item are the 3 spend down plans I've noted for Rancho Del Rey and the 2 high schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I read through the information, and it sounds like people are getting used to receiving or submitting their information on the forms that have been developed by and are in your ASB manuals that you and Gerardo developed. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
There's no issues with that.
And are you, aside from ASBs, you're doing other types of audits, obviously, it's listed here. Are you finding success with getting the information you need to perform those audits this year?
Yes, we are. And as we mentioned in some of the previous meetings, we've started using a SharePoint drive, a secure SharePoint drive. And so a lot of departments are finding it convenient to share information using that.
It's much better that way, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it doesn't get lost in the mail that way. So, all right, so do I have any questions from our committee members? Mr. Segura?
No questions. We went over a lot of that, but this is really something that we've done. The team has done a really good job in training. And I know there's turnover, with the school sites and all that, but he's still just really on top of it. I appreciate all the work that's been done with this.
Thank you. Ms. Lisa, do you have anything?
No, I think my questions were answered the last meeting, and then I was going to ask about, I think it was just answered right now about SharePoint, using some kind of system where you can hold this information. So that was answer was provided. So thank you.
All right, great.
Great.
So we don't have any other questions for you tonight. Daphne, we really appreciate you being here and sharing with us, and the work that you and Gerardo are doing is really needed and necessary, and we know that there's still a lot on your plate as well, so we thank you for that. And Dr. Salkeld's leadership, we appreciate your teamwork. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Salkeld, it's back to you.
Yes, Trustee Hall, I think the next one is the review of the minutes.
Yes. All right, so does anybody have questions on the minutes from our prior meetings?
No, I'll make a motion to approve.
All right,
I'll second.
all right. It's motion by Segura, second by Schmidt. So I agree. So that's a pass. We approve the minutes. And that's it. We'll call this meeting to, or that's it, Dr. Salkeld. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we end the meeting?
All right, I think we've covered it all. I think just more of like the last item, kind of recapping next steps. And as we mentioned earlier, is Trustee Hall, you would take on behalf of the committee the recommendations for our audits to the board next Monday.
Yes, I'll tell him that, and I'll brag on you guys.
Thank you.
Extensively, just because we can do that and you deserve it. So we really appreciate it. Thank you for spending this time with us. And I was just looking at all the notebooks that I have in my house. I went to look at last year's audit, kind of go through it, and it fell on my floor and spilled everywhere. So I said, oh, well. I said, oh, well, maybe it's time for me to, we've had three audit subcommittees meetings since this year started, since July. So we had one in August, one in November. We had this one tonight. It's been a lot. We appreciate you preparing us for that. We appreciate the work of our committee to do the review and to read through all those documents. And we just want to say thank you to everyone. And we hope you all have a wonderful holiday. But we'll see some of you next Monday. So good evening. Have a good week.
Happy holidays.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.